If you're swerving while driving home and the cops are called, they might show up at your door after you get to your house. And in the United States, you have the right to not answer your door. But in Canada, you may not have that same option. This video from Micah shows a Canadian cop coming up to his house with an alcohol screening device.
Cops are here.
Legal.
I'm here to administer an alcohol screening device.
Unfortunately, the cop is just a regular cop, and not one of those cool guys in the awesome uniforms on horseback. And he's carrying a device like this. And why is he on Micah's doorstep to begin with?
I'm not sure where the complaint came from. Maybe you were on your phone.
No, I don't. No.
This happens every day in the United States. Even in my own little backwater hamlet here in Virginia, the police routinely show up to someone's house and knock on the door due to a complaint that they were driving poorly on their way home. But what happens next astounds me.
Right now, I demand that you provide a sample of your breath into an approved screening device for proper
I was
analysis
so
of the breath
nervous.
to be made, and for you to accompany me for that purposes now.
Is that a legal demand? Does Micah have to blow into this device even though he's already at his house, fully inside his home? In most states here in these United States, Micah would not have to blow into this handheld test once he's inside his home. In Virginia, he definitely never has to blow into a handheld test. Remember that, Virginians. But Canada is the home of maple syrup, St. Joseph's Oratory, and unfortunately, the oppressed. The DUI laws were amended there in 2018 to require peasants to submit to field sobriety testing and preliminary screening devices, even if the officers do not catch them driving. 320.27 subsection 1 says, if a police officer has reasonable grounds to suspect that a person has alcohol or a drug in their body and that the person has, within the preceding 3 hours, operated a conveyance, the peace officer may, by demand, require the person to comply. The law goes on to require that peasants who the cops suspect have driven a vehicle and suspect may have a substance in their blood to submit to certain things, such as perform the physical coordination tests, provide samples of breath, provide samples of a bodily substance. And the worst part is, you don't have to be under arrest for all of this to happen. The police can simply demand this testing simply because they were called due to a complaint that you may have been driving under the influence. And so what does Micah do? Well, because the police showed up to his doorstep and demanded it, and the laws are very different in Canada, my opinion is he did the right thing by submitting to the test. Now, maybe there's a Canadian DUI lawyer who will disagree and explain why that's the wrong choice, but to me it appears that he did right.
Are you nervous?
Me? No, I'm not nervous. I already passed my test.
He was shaking.
So deep breath in.
Or was that me?
Seal and breathe out. Hard. Keep going. Perfect.
If this happens to you while on US soil, the answer is easy. Don't answer the door for the cops. If you mistakenly answer the door and you realize the police are there to potentially investigate you for a DUI, you can silently, quietly, politely close the door and stay in the house. Thanks to our Constitution here in the United States, the police cannot come into your home solely due to the suspicion that you may have driven drunk earlier in the day. The police can only enter your home with a warrant or an exception to the warrant requirement. And mere suspicion that you may have driven drunk is not going to be considered a legal exception unless there's some crazy scenario going on. But what would have happened to Micah in Canada if he had made the wrong choice and refused to submit to the officer's lawful demand at the door of his own home? In the land of bagged milk, if you're convicted of refusing a handheld breath test at the door of your own house, it carries the exact same punishments as if you were actually driving under the influence of alcohol. Which is backwards because the Canadian government is essentially assuming you're guilty and requiring you to prove your own innocence. The punishment for refusing a handheld breath test in the US definitely can vary based on your state's law. In most states, you never have to blow into one of these handheld tests. However, there are a very few states that do require it. If you open your door and talk to the police about your driving, it could be that those small minority of states might require you to blow into the handheld breath test on your doorstep. But in Virginia, you never have to blow into one of these little handheld gadgets. And what if you were driving sober, but got home and started drinking a little bit of Crown Royal, eh? And then the police show up and demand that you blow into their inaccurate handheld test. You're gonna be sorry. In Canada, the law does provide an exception to try to keep you from being convicted of a DUI under these circumstances. However, the law appears to put the burden on you, the defendant, to prove that you were not under the influence at the time that you were actually driving up to 3 hours before your interaction with the police. You'll need a lawyer and most likely an expert toxicologist to come in to try to prove your innocence. And in the US, the same thing could happen if you speak with the police at your doorstep after arriving home. If you consume alcohol after driving, the police could still try to claim that you were drunk at the time of your driving, and you may still need to try to get an expert toxicologist to do what's called a retrograde extrapolation and try to prove that your blood alcohol when you were driving was actually lower than the legal limit and you were not impaired. So what happened in Micah's case? What was his result?
And it's gonna think for a second.
And the results are
It says zero.
You're going.
pound it.
All right.
Thankfully for Micah, the complaint was unfounded, he didn't have anything to drink after he got home, and he blew zeros on the test. And thankfully for us, we don't live in Canada, although it's a fun place to visit and I did learn how to ski there a few years ago.
Good job!
I promise, I'm better now. To learn more about how to defend yourself against these DUI door encounters, check out this next video. And remember, all you freedom-loving Americans, don't talk to the police.